These are some of the most disturbing crimes on Twitter, and as the video goes on, things go from terrible to horrifying. On December 28, 2017, 18-year-old Casey Viner and 19-year-old Shane Gaskill were playing Call of Duty World War II together, which, in case you somehow don't know, is a popular military-themed video game that was released on November 3, 2017, so around a month and a half before this particular day. They were competing on a third-party website where players could bet small amounts of real money on the outcomes of matches, which only made this already competitive game feel even higher stakes. That day, the two were on the same team in a small match of 4 players against 4 others. The prize was just $1.50, which was barely anything. But tensions between Casey and Shane were already running high before the game even ended. They began having issues when Shane accidentally shot and killed Casey's own character. In many video games, when a player unintentionally harms a member of their own team instead of the enemy, it's called friendly fire. This mistake causes their team the match, and at the end, what started as an in-game argument quickly spiraled into something far more serious, spilling out of the virtual world and into real life. During the argument, Casey threatened to have Shane swatted, meaning he was going to pull a dangerous prank where someone makes a false emergency call to dispatch a heavily armed police SWAT team to an unsuspecting person's home. Shane acted like he wasn't bothered, and he even dared Casey to have him swatted, and in the process, he dropped his address. Casey noted the address and reached out to a known swatter named Tyler Barris, who goes by the username Swatistic on Twitter, and Casey handed over Shane's address and waited for the job to be done. Tyler had made a lot of calls that triggered swatting in the past, so when people needed a believable swatter, they went to him. Not long afterwards, Tyler placed the call and fed dispatch a story, claiming there had been an argument with his mother, that his father had been shot, and that he was holding his mother, brother, and sister hostage inside a home at Shane's address. When the dispatcher pressed him for details, he added that he had taken a handgun from his father and that he was hiding in his mother's closet, and with such specific details, the dispatcher believed him and immediately alerted the authorities. Upon receiving the call, Wichita police mobilized immediately, gearing up for what they believed was an active hostage situation. But despite the severity of the report, the responding officers were not a specialized SWAT team. They were actually just some standard patrol units that were sent to handle the crisis. As they arrived at the scene and got into position, they demanded that anyone inside the house come out. A confused and frightened-looking man stepped outside the home with his hands above his head. He wasn't armed, nor was he acting dangerous, but somehow, one of the officers named Justin Rapp saw him as a threat and opened fire, ending the man's life. Upon close examination, the man was identified as 28-year-old Andrew Finch, a man who never even played video games. As soon as the story hit social media, players began linking the tragedy to a feud between Casey and Shane, since the two made their disagreement public on the internet. Only then did it become clear that Shane had dropped a fake address during his argument with Casey. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Los Angeles, Tyler was glued to the television, checking to see if he did a perfect job, and as soon as the news came up, he believed he got the right target, so he was straight to his phone and messaged Shane.
Tyler, yo, answer me this. Tyler, did the police show up to your house? Yes or no? Shane, no, dumb man. Tyler, LMAO, here's how I know you're lying. Shane, they showed up at my old house, R-word. Tyler, that was the call script, so you just got caught in a lie. Shane, no, I played along with you. They showed up to my old house that we own and rented out. We don't live there anymore. I know you just wasted your time and now you're pissed.
But Tyler didn't believe Andrew and Shane were not related, so he bragged more.
Tyler, that was the call, lol. Shane, yes, it did, but they never showed up to my house. You guys got trolled. Look up who lives there. We moved out almost a year ago. I give you props though, you're the 1% that can actually SWAT.
At this point, Tyler got the message that they had just caused the death of an innocent man, but he didn't feel sorry for what he had done. Instead, he looked for another reason to mock Shane, saying,
Dude, my point is you gave an address that you didn't live at, but you were actually tough, lol. So you're a B-word.
Tyler then went back on Twitter to boast about being a good swatter since the police responded to his call, but nobody else found it funny. Instead, Twitter users started tagging both Casey and Shane, calling them out for murder, saying,
What am I hearing about Casey and Shane swatting an innocent person, getting them killed over $1.50 wager right after Christmas? You two deserve to rot in jail, and I really hope that you do.
On seeing that others were not amused, Tyler then defended himself, saying,
I didn't get anyone killed because I didn't discharge a weapon, and being a SWAT member isn't my profession.
But then hours later, everything changed when the media reported that the police had found out that Andrew's death was the result of a hoax call made by people feuding over a game. Shane was the first to get the information, so he messaged Tyler about it.
Shane, DM ASAP. Please, it's very important. Shane. Hello? Tyler. What do you want? Shane. Dude, me, you, and Babe need to delete everything. This is a murder case now. Casey deleted everything, you need to as well. This isn't a joke anymore. If you don't, you're literally silly. I'm trying to help you both out. They know it was a SWAT call.
The three of them scrambled to erase everything and began to wipe their messages and tried to bury any trace that could tie them to the hoax. Tyler also immediately changed his Twitter handle to GordTutor36 in an attempt to shed the identity he had used for his swatting work, but cybersecurity reporter Brian Krebs managed to recover important tweets before the switch. Those messages revealed that he was a serial swatter and that he had fabricated hostage situations and dangerous threats for money on several other occasions. Tyler himself then reached out to Brian for an interview where he admitted that he had prank called the authorities dozens of times. He said,
"Explosive threats are more fun and cooler than SWAT, but I began making money doing some SWAT requests."
Among the incidents he claimed responsibility for were several high-profile emergency jump scares, including a false threat that interrupted a US Federal Communications Commission meeting. He had also orchestrated a suspicious behavior scare at a high school in Panama City, Florida, where he basically told the officers that he had scattered explosives across the school and the planted devices would go off any moment now. The situation would later go viral, and Tyler apparently liked the attention he was getting because he would agree to every interview offer he'd get. In one of the interviews on a show known as Drama Alert, hosted by YouTuber Keemstar, Tyler showed no remorse but admitted that he played a part in Andrew's passing. During the same interview, Keemstar pressed Tyler on whether he believed he should face criminal charges if he's eventually caught by authorities, to which Tyler responded by saying that he didn't think he should be charged with the crime but accepted responsibility. He basically said that he'd accept whatever sentence he got but still insisted he wasn't guilty. A few hours after Tyler's Drama Alert appearance, he was arrested at the library near Exposition Park that had become his unofficial base of operations. The authorities then transported him to Los Angeles, where he was booked with a bond set at $500,000. After his arrest, federal prosecutors expanded the case with more charges including false emergency reports, cyberstalking, interstate threats, threats involving fire, wire fraud, and conspiracy built around hoax calls. And it didn't stop with just Tyler. The indictment also named Casey and Shane, tying all three to the chain of decisions that sparked the fatal swatting. More than a year after the incident in April 2019, Tyler eventually admitted to more than 50 felonies across multiple states. Many were tied to previous hoax threats, but the most serious one was directly connected to the swatting that led to Andrew's passing. In the end, he received a 20-year federal sentence, and then 5 months later in September 2019, prosecutors revealed that Casey's role didn't end with the online argument, because after also getting arrested, Casey pleaded guilty to conspiracy and obstructing justice, and a federal judge sentenced him to 15 months in prison, along with an order to pay $2,500 in restitution. And after serving his time, he would remain under supervised release for 2 years. Shane's case moved more slowly, but it reached its conclusion almost 5 years after the incident in September 2022, when he received an 18-month federal sentence after pleading guilty to wire fraud, a charge tied to the role he played in provoking Casey and then attempting to cover up the chain of events that led to the tragedy. Officer Justin Rapp, who shot Andrew, was not charged in this case and was later promoted from officer to detective. The city of Wichita was dropped from the lawsuit but was ordered to pay $2 million from its self-insurance fund and $1.5 million from the city's council reserves fund, with the assistant inspector general for the city paying $1.5 million as well to Andrew's family. While Andrew lost his life without warning, the next case is even more chilling since it involves a death that many people saw coming but could not stop.
The teenager used the Periscope app to share the horrific final moments of her life.
Going live on Twitter is pretty straightforward now, but back in 2015, you needed an extra app called Periscope to stream on the platform. You tap a button, the camera goes live, and anyone watching could see exactly what you were seeing in real time. For a lot of people, it was just a way to share a concert, a sunset, a night out with friends, and sometimes scenes that nobody was prepared to watch. One of the more well-known people who did the latter was a young woman named Oceane. But her story didn't start with going live. It started in May 2016 when Oceane was either 18 or 19 and she was in a relationship with a man who we will call Lucas. But somewhere along the line, Oceane and Lucas ended their relationship. However, what looks like the end marked the beginning of something very sinister. On May 10th, 2016, Oceane sent a text message to one of Lucas's friends detailing how Lucas had taken advantage of her and how she was unable to move past the harm he had done to her. At the end of the message, Oceane wrote about how she had made a decision to check herself out of this world because she couldn't live with what Lucas had done to her. After this message, the next time anyone saw Oceane was on Periscope Live, where she talked about her life, the relationship, and all that Lucas had done to her. She would end up going live 5 separate times, all of which added up to more than 2 hours of footage. But on the 5th one, which lasted 29 minutes, Oceane could be seen making her way to the Igli station, which is a commuter stop south of Paris. There, she left her phone and walked onto the tracks. The next time anyone saw Oceane was when her remains were discovered after being crushed beneath a train, and by the time the police got involved, the video had already spread. Periscope removed the streams from the platform, but the clips had already made their way to YouTube.
Non, je m'en fous. Je m'en fous en fait qu'il y ait du monde. Le message, t'inquiète pas, je peux te dire que le message sera transféré quand même en fait.
French authorities opened an investigation into the case and looked into the intimate assault allegation, but what ended this case was never widely reported. Periscope, on the other hand, did not make a public statement, and so the whole case silently went cold. But while a woman turned to the internet in her darkest moment, the next case is worse since the same internet was made into a weapon fashioned against several women.
There are some people that think these are just words on the internet. It's not. It has real consequences to real people.
People deal with depression in many ways, from medication to therapy. But for Zoe Quinn, a game developer, she decided to use her skills to not only help herself, but many others suffering from depression. And so in 2013, she released a game called Depression Quest, a text-based interactive fiction game that tried to put the player inside the mind of someone living with depression. Once the game became mainstream, mental health professionals praised it, while critics responded positively. But a corner of the gaming community absolutely hated it, and they were very vocal about their disinterest in the game. Immediately, Zoe became a target of online harassment on Twitter, although most of the tweets calling her out have now been deleted. Over time, the attacks would slowly die down, but just as she thought she was free from harassment, things got even worse. Because the following year, a single post would bring back the heat in tenfolds. On August 16th, 2014, Zoe's ex-boyfriend, Aaron Gjoni, dropped a now-deleted post titled The Zoe Post on WordPress, detailing their relationship and breakup. It included private chat logs, personal emails, and text messages. Buried within it was a suggestion that Zoe had slept with a journalist named Nathan Grayson, who worked at Kotaku, which is one of the biggest video game websites in the world, in exchange for a favorable review of Depression Quest. The blog post was quickly copied and spread to 4chan, where a community that had already spent months attacking Zoe found exactly what they were looking for. Then, 4 days later on August 20th, 2014, the Kotaku editor-in-chief Stephen Totilo refuted the claims in a post on the website, saying,
On March 31st, Nathan published the only Kotaku article he's written involving Zoe Quinn. It was about Game Jam, a failed reality show that Zoe and other developers were upset about being on. At the time, Nathan and Zoe were professional acquaintances. He quoted blog posts written by Zoe and others involved in the show. Shortly after that, in early April, Nathan and Zoe began a romantic relationship. He has not written about her since. Nathan never reviewed Zoe Quinn's game Depression Quest, let alone gave it a favorable review.
But even after this post, the attack would become much larger and much more organized, because someone was somehow able to get their hands on Zoe's explicit photos and then sent them to her colleagues. Not only that, but her accounts on Tumblr, Dropbox, and Skype were also hacked, and the threat, which had already been severe, multiplied 1,000-fold within days. It became worse when a conservative actor named Adam Baldwin, who at the time had nearly 190,000 Twitter followers, joined the online attack and started posting videos and tweets criticizing game journalism. He then coined the hashtag #Gamergate and used it in the posts. And then on August 27, 2014, 7 days after the Kotaku post, a right-wing journalist named Milo Yiannopoulos picked up the hashtag on Breitbart News, and just like that, the harassment campaign had a name. And with that name came a narrative that this was never about Zoe at all, but instead all of this was actually about concerns over corruption and favoritism in game journalism. Apparently, these attacks believed that when it came to women in the industry, there's no fairness and honesty. For the same reason, Zoe got more attacks, like one from an anonymous user saying,
"Next time she shows up at a conference, we give her a crippling injury that's never going to fully heal."
Another user posted her home address online, while others flooded her father's phone with messages calling Zoe an adult worker. At that point, Zoe was forced to leave her home for a safer location where she watched people on 4chan organize their raids on her. She caught members of the chat room discussing how to hack her email, where to go stalk her in person, and how they hoped to destroy her career. But the campaign didn't stop there, it only expanded further. The next target was Anita Sarkeesian, a feminist media critic who had been running a YouTube series called Tropes vs. Women in Video Games since 2011, where she analysed how women were portrayed in gaming. She had already been a target of online harassment before Gamergate existed, but when a new episode of her series dropped on August 24th, 2014, the Gamergate crowd locked onto her with everything they had. Similarly, her home address was leaked, and she was sent death and forceful intimacy threats. And just like Zoe, she was forced to flee her home. By the following month, on September 24th, 2014, over 1 million tweets had been made using the Gamergate hashtag. An analysis by the news magazine called Newsweek and the social media management platform named Brandwatch found more than 2 million of these messages and tweets between September and October alone, and at least 500,000 of the sampled tweets came from new Twitter accounts, which basically means that a considerable chunk of the Gamergate community were making new accounts to post more tweets to make it seem as if they are much greater in number than they actually were. And it continued well into October 2014, when Anita was scheduled to speak at Utah State University. Before the event, the school received 3 separate anonymous threats. The most detailed one claimed affiliation with Gamergate and said,
"I have at my disposal a semi-automatic rifle, multiple pistols, and a collection of pipe bombs. This will be the deadliest school shooting in American history, and I'm giving you a chance to stop it. You have 24 hours to cancel Sarkeesian's talk. Anita Sarkeesian is everything wrong with the feminist woman, and she is going to die screaming like the craven little adult worker that she is if you let her come to USU. I will write my manifesto in her spilled blood, and you will all bear witness to what feminist lies and poison have done to the men of America."
Although the school's administration believed it was an empty threat, Utah's open carry laws meant that no additional security measures could be put in place. The school itself said to CNN in a statement,
"If a person has a valid concealed firearm permit and is carrying a weapon, they are permitted to have it at the venue."
Anita quickly determined she could be in danger, so she cancelled. Meanwhile, in mid-October 2014, a third target emerged. Brianna Wu, who was another independent game developer and co-founder of a studio called Giant Space Cat, also had her home address posted on 8chan, which is known as 8kun, and is a rather controversial anonymous message board platform similar to 4chan, but with even lesser rules because it's pretty much completely unmoderated. Meanwhile, on Twitter, certain accounts targeting her had names like
"Death to Brianna."
For safety, Brianna and her husband fled her home and then involved the police. She also offered an $11,000 reward for information leading to a conviction, and made it clear publicly that she had no intention of going silent. But even after everything, by April 2016, Brianna was still receiving threats in such a volume that she had hired a full-time staff just to document them. As a result of the campaign, she was later diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. But the attackers didn't stop with these game developers though. They actually extended the hate towards anyone who supported the victims. For example, the actress Felicia Day, who wrote a blog post expressing her fears about Gamergate. Within minutes of the post going live, her home address and phone number had been posted online. But while every victim I have mentioned so far is female, there was actually one man who was attacked in connection to the Gamergate campaign. His name is Phil Fish, a game developer who had publicly defended Zoe when she was being attacked, and because of that, the attackers hacked his personal accounts and exposed his company's internal documents. The situation overwhelmed Phil so much that he announced he was leaving the gaming industry entirely, calling the situation unacceptable. At this time, 4chan founder Christopher Poole decided to take action against the users coordinating these attacks on the site. He banned Gamergate discussion from the site after escalating attacks targeted towards the gamers. But instead of putting an end to the campaign, the community migrated to 8chan, a site that would later become heavily associated with far-right extremism. And even after the news of the campaign was widespread, the Gamergate supporters took things further by claiming the harassment never happened, and accusing victims of fabricating the threats against themselves. By 2015, the FBI got involved and opened an investigation into the months-long campaign. But in the end, the US Supreme Court ruled that online threats alone don't qualify as a punishable crime without proof of intent, which is why it is extraordinarily difficult to prosecute anyone for what had been done. With this ruling, the campaign supporters kept going until 2017, when Gamergate finally began fading as a major organized movement. Undoubtedly, 1,000 people's words can be overwhelming, but in the next case, one throwaway joke brought the full weight of the law crashing down on a single person.
Paul Chambers arrived at Britain's High Court, flanked by two of the country's best-known, most loved television personalities. Comforting, perhaps, but what an extraordinary turn of events for an ordinary man whose life has become surreal.
In the early hours of January 6, 2010, a 26-year-old British man named Paul Chambers arrived at the Robin Hood Airport in South Yorkshire. He'd booked a ticket to Northern Ireland to visit his girlfriend, but upon getting to the airport, Paul discovered that it had been shut down for the time being due to the intense snowfall that engulfed the entire country. Frustrated, Paul picked up his phone and logged into his Twitter account to vent to his 600 followers, saying,
"Crap, Robin Hood Airport is closed. You've got a week and a bit to get your act together, otherwise I'm blowing the airport sky high."
Since Paul wasn't exactly a public figure, the tweet would fly under the radar and was only seen by a handful of people at a time. However, just a week later, an off-duty airport manager would stumble upon the tweet during an unrelated computer search. Since it obviously looked like a joke, the airport officials deemed the threat not credible, but still decided to alert the police just in case. Unfortunately, the authorities didn't find Paul's tweet funny. Using the details on his account, the anti-terror police traced Paul to his workplace and placed him under arrest. They then proceeded to search his home and confiscate all his devices, including the phone he used to make the tweet. Following his arrest, Paul was charged under the Communications Act of 2003 for sending a message
of a menacing character.
And despite the fact that Paul kept insisting it was a joke, the case moved forward. On May 10, 2010, Doncaster magistrates found Paul guilty and hit him with a fine of £385. He was also ordered to pay £600 in costs plus a £15 victim surcharge. But Paul wasn't ready to back down just yet. He appealed his conviction, arguing that the police had taken the joke too far, but the court didn't seem to agree with him. 10 months after Paul had made the tweet, in November 2010, a circuit judge named Jacqueline Davies threw out the appeal on all counts, and even slammed Paul with more punishment, ordering him to pay an extra £2,000 legal bill for the appeal proceedings. She claimed that the tweet actually contained malice and that Paul should have known that the tweet would be taken seriously. But what makes this story even more unsettling is that Paul was actually supposed to win his appeal case. According to the lawyers representing the Crown Prosecution Service, the initial plan was to back away as they had no interest in opposing his appeal. The service reportedly even sent Paul and his lawyer, David Allen Green, papers stating that it now agreed that the case should come to an end. However, at the last minute, the Director of Public Prosecutions and former human rights lawyer, Keir Starmer, would allegedly overrule his subordinates, forcing the case to go forward. And yes, this is the same Keir Starmer as the one who was the Prime Minister of the UK from July 2024 till June 22nd, 2026. When questioned about this claim, a CPS spokesperson denied that Keir Starmer personally made decisions on the case, insisting he wasn't even involved in any of the decisions regarding the case. The CPS admitted that they'd actually considered throwing the appeal at one point, but explained that only the High Court had the authority to change a decision made by the Crown Court. Paul, who had lost his job after his arrest, would end up spending over £18,000 in legal fees, trying to overturn his conviction. But as news of the case began to spread on the internet, Paul would begin to receive massive support from the general public, with thousands of Twitter users putting out tweets similar to the ones that got Paul in trouble with the hashtag #IamSpartacus as a form of protest against the ruling. Comedian Stephen Fry was one of those who lent his voice to the case, publicly defending Paul's right to make what many considered a bad joke, and even offering to pay Paul's fines and the subsequent legal fees. In addition, several legal commentators and journalists like Nick Cohen would also comment on the legal drama, criticizing the conviction and calling for it to be overturned. With the general public supporting Paul, he would file another appeal, taking the case to the High Court. And on July 27, 2012, after a lengthy back and forth, the story eventually reached a conclusion as the court would overturn Paul's conviction, stating that the tweet was just frustration and bad humor expressed on social media. In the end, the state was ordered to cover Paul's legal costs. Getting arrested for a tweet is shocking, which makes the next case even more disturbing, since it involves the most horrible tweets being overlooked.
I cracked some jokes, I was mean, and like I always am. And if I crack a few jokes at a Hollywood megastar's expense, so what?
Back in 2015, when the reboot of the 1980s supernatural comedy Ghostbusters was released in the United States, it received a divided reaction from fans. While some loved it, some clearly hated it solely because the producers cast an all-women lead group as opposed to the original movie. One of those who had a problem with the movie was President Donald Trump, who called out the producers on his Instagram, saying,
"They're remaking Indiana Jones without Harrison Ford. You can't do that. And now they're making Ghostbusters with only women. What's going on?"
A lot of people shared the same sentiments as Donald Trump, and it was evident in their response to the trailer, which set a record for the most disliked movie trailer in YouTube history. However, the hate became stronger in 2016 after the movie premiered at theaters on July 15th, as the callouts were getting more and more specific. 3 days later, on July 18th, 2016, Leslie Jones, who is one of the actors in the movie, mentioned in a now-deleted tweet that she was getting hate mail from fans and urged them to stop blaming her for doing her job. In response to that, Milo Yiannopoulos, a technology editor at Breitbart, a right-wing news website, tweeted saying,
"If at first you don't succeed because your work is terrible, play the victim. Everyone gets hate mail."
For context, Milo didn't have a small following on Twitter. He had about 338,000 followers, and he was a well-known figure in conservative online spaces. Years earlier, he was known for championing the Gamergate movement, the controversy involving harassment campaigns largely aimed at women in the gaming industry that I talked about earlier. From here, he even gained a more loyal following who shared the same sentiments as him. And it didn't take long for Leslie to know who Milo is, and she soon expressed her disbelief in her response, saying,
"I'm hearing this guy is a columnist. How sad. Is this how he gets his readers, through supporting hate? I'm acting like a victim? Nice job."
Even after calling him out, Milo never considered backing down. He responded to Leslie's post, tweeting,
"Barely literate. America needs better schools."
At this point, Leslie got tired of Milo's games and said to him,
"You have been reported. I hope they lock your account."
After Milo's posts, his followers flooded Leslie's mentions. One of the users likened her to an animal, saying,
"Leslie, your Ghostbusters isn't the first to have an ape in it,"
and attached a poster of an old Ghostbusters live-action sitcom that featured a character in a gorilla suit. To make things worse, some blamed her for the existence of AIDS, while others were extremely dehumanizing towards her. Amidst all of this, Leslie thought to call out Twitter, saying,
"Twitter, I understand you got free speech, I get it, but there has to be some guidelines when you let things spread like that."
Not long after this tweet, the then CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, commented under her post saying,
"Hi Leslie, following, please DM me when you have a moment."
While it isn't clear if Leslie messaged Jack or not, about 3 hours later, she reached a breaking point and dropped one final sad tweet, saying,
"I leave Twitter tonight with tears and a very sad heart. All this because I did a movie. You can hate the movie, but what I got today, wrong."
The same night, Leslie's account was indeed gone from Twitter, but at the same time, Twitter released a statement that reads,
"People should be able to express diverse opinions and beliefs on Twitter, but no one deserves to be subject to violence online, and our rules prohibit inciting or engaging in targeted harassment of others." Over the past 48 hours in particular, we've seen an uptick in the number of accounts violating these policies and have taken enforcement actions against these accounts, ranging from warnings that also require the deletion of tweets violating our policies to permanent suspensions.
The statement did not mention Milo by name, but BuzzFeed was first to report that his account was the one that had been permanently removed. Later, Breitbart posted about the suspension and mentioned that Milo was indeed suspended 20 minutes before a major event he was to attend. The website also posted a screenshot of the message Twitter sent to Milo directly stating that his suspension is permanent this time. Milo responded swiftly via the Breitbart website, saying,
"With the cowardly suspension of my account, Twitter has confirmed itself as a safe space for Muslim terrorists and Black Lives Matter extremists, but a no-go zone for conservatives. Twitter is holding me responsible for the actions of fans and trolls using the special pretzel logic of the left. Where are the Twitter police when Justin Bieber's fans hurt themselves on his behalf? Like all acts of the totalitarian regressive left, this will blow up in their faces, netting me more adoring fans. We're winning the culture war, and Twitter just shot themselves in the foot. This is the end for Twitter. Anyone who cares about free speech has been sent a clear message. You are not welcome on Twitter."
While Milo sounded like he had been suspended unfairly, this wasn't the first time his account had faced sanctions online. During the Gamergate movement, Milo received warnings from Twitter for being extreme and eventually got his account temporarily suspended. But as for the accounts that had sent racist and dehumanizing tweets to Leslie, many of them remained untouched. Leslie, on the other hand, continued to appear in movies, including the animated movie Sing, and she even voiced the antagonist of Angry Birds 2, the ex-girlfriend of Mighty Eagle named Zeta. If nothing, Leslie Jones's case shows how powerful Twitter can be, but maybe not so powerful, because all it took a teenager was a laptop and patience to humiliate the platform.
Beaumont, 12 000 habitants, une commune au milieu des volcans d'Auvergne. C'est ici, dans cette chambre en sous-sol, qu'un jeune homme, François Costet, a piraté les sites informatiques des plus grandes stars hollywoodiennes.
In 2009, a forgotten email account at Twitter triggered a quiet chain reaction that opened the company's internal systems to an intruder from several continents away. The case started with an individual named Francois Cousteix, who is known online as Hacker Kroll, a self-taught French computer programmer in his late teens who had spent years teaching himself web security through forums and open source material. At the time, Francois had no formal employment and was solely motivated by curiosity and thrill of navigating systems he wasn't supposed to see. But unlike other hackers, Francois didn't focus on using advanced exploits to infiltrate Twitter's servers. Before attempting any attack, Francois spent weeks collecting publicly available information about Twitter employees, including names, email formats, job titles, birthdays, locations, pet names, and online aliases. Using this information, he was able to get a complete view of the people who handled Twitter's internal tools. Francois knew that all he had to do was infiltrate the personal email of one of the employees. But while trying to recover the password of one of his targets, he would notice a partially hidden recovery email associated with the account. When he checked, he discovered the Hotmail account was no longer active, and since Hotmail had a policy that allowed them to recycle dormant accounts, he simply registered the account in his name. Immediately afterwards, Francois returned to Gmail and triggered a password reset, and now that he had direct access to the recovery email, all it took was a few more clicks, and he was in. Once inside the Gmail account, Francois would come across an email containing a welcome note from a random service showing the username and password in clear text. Unfortunately, like many other internet users, this particular employee also used the same password for most of his other accounts. Francois then used the same password to gain entry into the employee's Google Apps account, where he found documents and access credentials for internal tools. Since he'd already come this far, it was easy for Francois to move into the personal and work account of Twitter's top leadership, including Evan Williams and Biz Stone, the co-founders of Twitter, as well as several other executives. With these important accounts, Francois began gathering internal documents, credit card numbers, contracts with major tech companies, salary lists, employee records, business plans, earnings projections, and even files detailing Twitter's planned future office features. He would also access Twitter's GoDaddy domain management, which is basically where the website address is managed, and for a while, Francois held the power to redirect the web address twitter.com to wherever he wanted. But even though he had reached the very core of the platform's internal operations, he was very discreet with the breach, so much so that no one at Twitter knew he was there, and he almost got away with it until he decided to blow his own trumpet. On July 14th, 2009, Francois reached out anonymously to TechCrunch, an online newspaper, to tell them he had hacked Twitter quietly. And just in case they didn't believe him, he sent them hundreds of confidential corporate and personal documents belonging to Twitter and Twitter employees. The leak alarmed Twitter's staff, especially Evan and his wife, whose Gmail had also been compromised. However, Evan would later explain that the most sensitive content wasn't from Twitter's production systems, but from personal accounts that indirectly exposed internal operations. Worried about the leak, Twitter's team launched an investigation to find out who was responsible for the breach, involving both the FBI and French authorities. Even though Francois tried to cover his tracks, he still couldn't hide forever. By March 2010, the investigators tracked the breach to his computer. They would immediately swoop in to arrest him at his home in Clermont-Ferrand, France, where his computer was seized as evidence. 2 months later, he was convicted and handed a 5-month suspended prison sentence. And while all this was happening, TechCrunch reached out to Francois to ask if there was a message that he would like to send to Twitter. He then responded with an apology in French to Twitter's employees and the public, while encouraging everyone to be more careful about security, saying,
I apologize to Twitter. I believe this company will be going places. I didn't make money by that. Security is a topic that has interested me for many years, and I want to turn my hobby into a career. In my everyday life, I often help people to protect themselves against the dangers of the internet. I teach them the basic rules, such as being careful where you click, the files you download, and what you type on the keyboard. Ensure that the computer is protected against viruses, external attacks, spams, phishing, update the operating system, software frequently used, thinking of using passwords without any common point between them, thinking about changing them regularly, never keep off-the-record information on the computer. I hope my numerous interventions will allow the firm to understand how easy it can be for a malicious person to access confidential information without much knowledge.
While one teenager found Twitter's backdoor to flex his hacking skills, the next case is concerning since it involves a group of kids buying God mode access to the platform.
He is the local teen whose cyber crimes began when other kids were still playing video games.
Back in 2020, Elon Musk wasn't the owner of Twitter, but he was very close to being the richest man in the world. He already had the type of wealth and influence that made his words hold significant power, and so on July 15th, 2020, when he made a shocking post on Twitter, he drove netizens crazy. His tweet read,
"Happy Wednesday. I'm giving back Bitcoin to all of my followers. I'm doubling all payments sent to the Bitcoin address below. You send 0.1 BTC, I send 0.2 BTC back, ending with a wallet address."
Immediately, people began to pump money into the Bitcoin address. Before anyone could even ask why Elon needed you to send him money in the first place, other public figures including Kanye West, Floyd Mayweather, former President Barack Obama, Michael Bloomberg, Joe Biden, and many more had joined the trend. While their tweets pretty much had the same messages, some phrased theirs differently from Elon's. An example is Michael Bloomberg's tweet that read,
"I'm giving back to the community. All Bitcoin sent to the address below will be sent back doubled. If you send $1,000, I will send back 2,000. Only doing it for 30 minutes.
Within 4 minutes, the tweet already had over 300 retweets, 190 comments, and more than 300 likes. Kanye took his own tweet a step further by stating a reason for his generosity, saying,
"I'm giving back to my community due to COVID-19. All Bitcoin sent to my address below will be sent back doubled. If you send 1,000, I will send back 2,000. Only doing this for the next 30 minutes. Enjoy."
During the COVID-19 pandemic, while the US government provided financial and social aid for citizens, so many countries didn't have the capacity to help their citizens, which made so many people see these opportunities as one not to be missed. Although many people could not participate, those who had enough Bitcoin and needed it to be doubled partook in the scheme. Not long after these tweets popped up, certain users started putting out tweets to inform others they could be a scam, considering how coordinated the tweets are. At the same time, everyone who sent Bitcoin came out to say they didn't get any response from any of the public figures they sent money to, and then all of a sudden, the tweets started disappearing from the profiles. It was at this point that those who sent Bitcoin knew they had probably been scammed. The confirmation they needed eventually came from Twitter support account, who put out a statement saying,
"We detected what we believe to be a coordinated social engineering attack by people who successfully targeted some of our employees with access to internal systems and tools."
For context, back in 2020, Twitter had something called an internal admin panel, which is like a master control room for the entire platform. The people with access to it could do things that regular users could never do. Things like changing account information, resetting passwords, and basically overriding any security measure a user had set up. The people who had access to this panel were Twitter employees, and it was supposed to be one of the most locked down systems on the platform. But unfortunately, certain people had managed to hack this system. The police immediately got to work and tried to track down the attackers. However, it took them some months before they finally got some breakthrough in their investigation. The following year, in 2021, a 23-year-old man named Joseph James O'Connor, whose username was PlugWalkJoe, was arrested for the crime. Surprisingly, Joseph was not some shadowy figure deep in a government black site. He was just a young man who spent most of his time online, operating in spaces where hacking was less of a crime and more of a flex. He wasn't alone either. Around him was a loose network of people who shared the same interests, skills, and eventually the same criminal charges. One of them is Graham Clark, who was 17 years old at the time and therefore not named publicly at first. Others were named, including Nima Fazil, a 22-year-old from Orlando, Florida, and Mason Shepherd, who was from Bognor Regis in the UK. Shockingly, what these guys did was simple. They called Twitter employees directly, pretended to be from Twitter's own internal IT department, and somehow convinced the employees to hand over access to Twitter's internal systems. Within a few hours, their Bitcoin wallet received over $110,000 from different people. But what Joseph and his crew were doing behind the scenes weren't beyond just posting scam tweets. According to court documents, they were running multiple operations at once. When they were not hacking accounts, they were busy selling access to hacked accounts to anyone who was willing to pay. Also, 2 years earlier in May of 2019, Joseph and his co-conspirators had already carried out a separate attack on a Manhattan-based cryptocurrency company. The method they used this time was called a SIM swap. The way it works is that the scammers gather information about their victims, then contact their mobile network pretending to be the victim. Then they lie that their phone was stolen and ask the victim's number to be moved to a new SIM card. Once that is done, the victim's phone would suddenly lose signal, and from there, the scammers will receive the victim's calls and text messages directly to their own device. Since a lot of accounts use a phone number for two-factor authentication, the attacker could now bypass that entirely and just log into any accounts the victim had online. Joseph and his crew used this to drain cryptocurrency wallets straight from the company, walking away with a significant amount of money. That was a crazy level of fraud, but the crimes didn't stop there. Joseph was also charged in connection with the takeover of TikTok and Snapchat accounts. In one particularly bold move, he posted a video directly to a hijacked TikTok account where his own voice was clearly audible. In that video, he threatened to release private material belonging to the account's owner unless people joined a Discord group he was running. And to worsen his case, Joseph was actually using technology to stalk a human who was not yet of age, which is a charge that prosecutors described as particularly disturbing given the victim's very young age. When Joseph appeared in court, he didn't fight any of his cases. Instead, he pleaded guilty to everything. As part of the plea deal, Joseph agreed to forfeit over $794,000 and to make restitution to the people he had victimized. And on June 23, 2023, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Joseph wasn't the only one who faced serious consequences though, as his other 3 co-conspirators were also sentenced. Graham got 3 years because he was prosecuted as a juvenile, and Nima avoided a long prison sentence and got away with probation, while Mason's sentence isn't widely reported because he avoided extradition to the US, unlike Joseph, who was taken to the US from Spain. Immediately, Twitter caught on to how the system got hacked, and the company upgraded its internal security protocols and reduced the number of employees with access to those kinds of administrative tools. The Bitcoin hackers needed the trusts of millions of people to get what they wanted, but the next case is more disturbing since it involves a smaller human who became a victim of trust.
A 26-year-old man has been arrested for allegedly kidnapping a...
It's the night of December 27th, 2022, somewhere outside Salt Lake City, Utah. Ken, a father of 2, goes downstairs to check on his sons, and the second he opens the bedroom door, something feels wrong. The blinds are up, the window is open, and his son is gone. This is the story of how a teenager, who we will call Liam, ended up disappearing through his own bedroom window in the middle of the night. Liam was born into the McConaughey family by parents Ken and Heather, who worked hard to make sure their kids were comfortable. Liam grew up as a normal kid who made friends easily, loved to play golf and spent his leisure time building Legos. And even though Heather was a busy Air Force medic working toward her physician assistant degree, she made sure to pay attention to how her sons used technology. Heather made sure they both didn't have phones until they were old enough, and when they eventually had phones, she set up parental controls, blocked certain websites, and ensured the device required her approval before anything new could be downloaded. These measures made Heather relax to some extent until she discovered Liam was spending a lot of time online and pulling away a little. While she found that concerning, Heather chalked it up to him being a teenager, so she only watched him closely. But what she didn't know was that someone else was watching Liam too. On Liam's phone, he had access to the internet and was able to take interest in the furry community, which is a large, loosely organized online subculture made up of people who are interested in animal characters that act like humans. It's a space where a lot of teenagers feel genuinely seen and accepted, and certain adults visit to blend in. One of those adults was 26-year-old Tadashi Kojima, who went by the name Aaron Michael Zeman before 2018. Online, he went by a username called Hunter Floofy Fox, so no one knew his real name. However, on social media, he publicly identified himself using the term MAP, or MAP, which stands for attracted person. And on his Twitter account, he posted notes and poetry that presented him as a caring, emotionally available figure, the kind of person a lonely your curious teenager might feel drawn to. Somewhere between Discord, Roblox, and Twitter, Tadashi found Liam, and the two would later become friends. They started by talking about shared interests, but over the weeks that followed, Tadashi shifted the conversations off those platforms and onto Twitter, then onto Telegram, where things became even more personal. He referred to Liam as
my lamb
and talked openly about the two of them going on a trip together. He posted notes that appeared to be written for Liam publicly on his Twitter account, and when Liam wasn't responding fast enough, he found other ways to keep the line open, pushing Liam to create backup accounts on multiple platforms so that if one got taken down, there was always another route in. On the night of November 20th, Heather heard Liam talking to someone on the phone, but she never interrupted until lights out when she went to take away Liam's phone. She then took the phone to her room and started hearing it buzz over and over. When she unlocked it, she found a text from Tadashi excitedly telling Liam he had gotten a new job in Utah and would be moving there. In another message, he had asked Liam to send him their home address and the location of his school bus stop, and Liam had sent both. For divulging the family's information to a total stranger, Heather and Ken grounded Liam and took away his devices. But 9 days later, on November 29th, they discovered he had found an old discarded phone somewhere in the house and had began using it to keep talking to Tadashi. And this time, where Heather went through the messages, what she found was far worse. Tadashi had been sending Liam explicit content and asking how he reacted to it, and Liam had also sent Tadashi photos of himself. In Heather's words, she was sick to her stomach after finding out, so Ken reached out to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and the family was directed to the Layton City Police Department, where they filed a report and waited for an outcome. And just to be safe, they even pulled their boys out of school for a week. And 12 days after Heather made the discovery on December 2nd, local police petitioned a state judge for a search warrant to be served to Twitter, requesting account information tied to who they believed was the predator. The warrant was granted the same day. But here's where things start to go wrong. The search warrant was sent to Twitter with the wrong username. The actual account was Hunter Floofy Fox, but the warrant listed Hunter Fluffy Fox, a username that had never existed. This delayed the whole process for a while, as 20 days passed before a collected warrant was submitted to the judge. Throughout the time, Tadashi kept posting, and on December 13th, he put a shirtless photo of himself on his Hunter Fox account with a caption about coming home before the holidays, indirectly addressing Liam. The next day, on December 14th, Liam responded from the family's virtual reality headset, a Meta Quest device he had found access to while his phone was gone. He typed out that he was packed and ready to go. Then, 3 days later on December 17th, Tadashi posted photos of marijuana products with a message teasing the trip they were about to take together. And then 2 more days later on December 19th, he posted that the two of them were getting married on the trail. By the time Christmas hit, Twitter had still not responded, so 2 days after Christmas on December 27th, Liam slipped out through his bedroom window with his passport and piggy bank. After discovering he was gone, Heather and Ken called the police, but it took over 45 minutes for officers to arrive. So before they did, Ken drove around the neighborhood with their other son looking for anything. Meanwhile, Heather went door to door asking neighbors to check their own security footage, but nothing was found. That afternoon, people issued an Amber Alert, and within hours, people online had found Tadashi's Twitter account. By the way, in case you didn't know, an Amber Alert is an emergency notification system used by law enforcement to broadcast critical information about a recently abducted child to the general public, and almost immediately users were tagging Elon Musk directly in replies to the Hunter Fox account, pointing out that a smaller human had been taken and demanding the account be suspended. But Elon did not respond and the account remained active. Police submitted an emergency data request to Twitter after the kidnapping, but the company pushed back on that too, initially declining to release anything. However, after law enforcement provided additional context and clarified they had an urgent missing younger human situation, Twitter produced the information within 2 hours, according to a statement from Twitter's then VP of Trust and Safety, Ella Irwin. Ella also claimed that police had not initially made clear the request was connected to a missing smaller human case, so they couldn't act accordingly. But in the end, none of that information found Liam. The next day, on the morning of December 28th, a civilian reported a suspicious vehicle parked at a gas station in Nebraska, nearly 800 miles from Salt Lake City, not knowing that there was a missing kid inside. When the police arrived, they arrested Tadashi on the spot and Liam was safely taken back home. Tadashi was then charged with 4 counts of intimate assault in Nebraska, along with federal charges of kidnapping, coercion, and exploitation of a younger human. In 2024, Tadashi pleaded guilty to his charges and was eventually sentenced to 15 years in federal prison in April 2025. But even though justice was served, the McConney family was never the same again. Ken said the experience broke something in him and described developing severe anxiety and depression in the months that followed. The family found it hard to leave the house for a while and ended up subjecting themselves to therapy. Slowly, things started getting better as Liam returned to school. He began using a phone but without an internet connection, and later went out with friends. According to Heather, although Liam never talked about what happened, he was gradually understanding how manipulative Tadashi was, but he had not fully processed it. While Liam was eventually recovered, the next case is mind-boggling since it involves a recovery that took too long.
All this week, WCCO has been investigating the laws and policies surrounding.
Back in 2016, John was just a younger human living a normal life online. Like a lot of people his age, he used social media, Twitter especially, to meet new people and make friends. And at some point, he actually made a lot of friends who presented themselves as people of his age. At first, they seemed friendly enough and acted as normal kids until they showed John they were not kids at all. In the same year, they began pressuring John into sending them private content. They manipulated him, and when that wasn't enough, they threatened him. At the time, John was really young, so he felt scared and trapped, and soon enough, he started sending explicit videos of himself with another person who we will call Dylan, a boy who was also John's age mate, according to the request of the perpetrators. What both John and Dylan believed was they would be free once they did what the perpetrators wanted. But in reality, once they started, the perpetrators never stopped requesting more. One day, John decided he was no longer sending explicit videos of himself and blocked the people who had been tormenting him. They told John he was making a big mistake, and afterwards, they disappeared from his life. For 2 years straight, John never heard from them, until 2019 when he got to school and everyone started calling him names. In no time, John's classmates showed him explicit videos of himself circulating on Twitter, and at the time, it had already accumulated over 167,000 views and more than 2,200 retweets. But while John was viewed as a boy who was involved in adult business by his classmates, some Twitter users who came across the video immediately flagged the content as soon as they discovered the people in the footage were very young. But throughout the day, the video stayed up. This time, John involved his mother, who immediately started working through Twitter's reporting system. They reported the accounts, verified John's age, and provided proof that John was being exploited. They then waited for Twitter to bring down the video or at least report to them. And of course, Twitter did respond, but with a message saying,
"We've reviewed the content and didn't find a violation of our policies, so no action will be taken."
John and his mother couldn't believe it. They then wrote back directly, emphasizing that both people in the video were very young when it was recorded, that they had been forced and threatened, and that the footage was now being shared without their consent. But this time, even after everything they said, Twitter didn't respond. John's mother didn't give up though, and she kept reporting the accounts and continued to contact Twitter about the situation. Again, nothing got better. Instead, the video got more views. At school, John started getting bullied by his classmates because of the video, and eventually the situation pushed him to a dark place. This was really shocking because Twitter clearly wrote under their child safety policy,
"We have zero tolerance for any forms of younger people's intimate exploitation and remove certain media depicting physical smaller human abuse to prevent the normalization of violence against children."
But when John and his mother repeatedly reported this same act against Twitter's policy, the platform failed to act on it. After getting nowhere with the platform, John's mother reached out to an agent with the United States Department of Homeland Security with her son's case. And it was this agent who contacted Twitter directly, asking them to bring down the video. This time, Twitter agreed, and on January 30th, 2020, the video was taken down. Afterwards, Twitter suspended the accounts involved and reported them to the National Center on Missing and Exploited Children. 2 years later, on January 20th, 2021, the National Center on Intimate Exploitation Law Center, the Haber Law Firm, and the Maciasic firm filed a federal lawsuit against Twitter on John's behalf in the US District Court. Twitter defended itself by pointing to a law section called Section 230, which generally protects internet companies from being sued over content posted by their users. From here, the case dragged on for 2 more years, and in May 2023, a federal appeals court sided with Twitter, saying the platform is indeed protected by Section 230. In addition, the court denied a full rehearing, leaving the case unresolved for a while. However, 2 more years later in 2025, John's lawyer took the fight to the Supreme Court, still arguing that Section 230 was never meant to protect companies that knowingly kept explicit content of younger humans on their platform. As of making this video, the Supreme Court hasn't decided yet whether to hear the case or dismiss it. The bad guys remain at large even though they went after a young person, just like the bad guys in the next case who didn't go after individuals but after institutions.
The New York Times website has been hacked as it wouldn't load for users across the United States on Tuesday.
On April 23, 2013, the Twitter account of the news agency called the Associated Press posted a tweet that stopped America dead in its tracks. According to the tweet, 2 explosions had gone off at the White House and the then President Barack Obama had been injured. Within minutes, chaos spread across the nation. Part of the reason people believed it so fast was the timing, because just 8 days earlier, 2 bombs had gone off at the Boston Marathon, which was the world's oldest annual marathon, and so the whole country was already on edge, bracing for the next attack. And as people scrambled to make sense of what they'd just read, the stock market came crashing down, and over $136.5 billion was wiped out in what felt like a blink of an eye. You see, a huge chunk of stock trading isn't done by people anymore. It's actually either done by computers or AIs, and these trading programs are built to scan the news and social media for certain keywords, and the second they spot something that sounds like trouble, they start selling on their own, faster than any human could react. And the AP tweet set off every alarm at once because words like explosion, White House, and Obama, coming from the most trusted news account on the platform and getting retweeted thousands of times in seconds, was all the machines needed to see, and they began dumping stocks instantly, causing the crash. That was a problem, but the craziest part was the news was completely false. This was later confirmed by the Associated Press in a tweet from an alternate account saying,
"The @AP Twitter account has been suspended after it was hacked. The tweet about an attack on the White House was false."
But people were still left with one burning question: who was behind it? They wouldn't have to wonder for long, because just hours later a Twitter account named the Syrian Electronic Army, or the SEA for short, stepped forward and claimed responsibility. But this wasn't the first time the internet had heard that name, and it definitely wouldn't be the last. To understand how the SEA actually were, you have to go back to 2011, when the whole region was caught up in something called the Arab Spring. Basically, across the Middle East, people who were tired of living under the same rulers for decades started rising up, demanding freedom and an end to corruption, and one by one, governments began to fall. Eventually, that wave reached Syria. At the time, Syria was run by President Bashar al-Assad, whose family had gripped power for around 40 years ever since his father took control back in the 1970s. So when Syrians flooded the street in March 2011, they weren't just angry about one law or one bad person, they wanted an end to a system that had controlled their lives for as long as most of them could remember. But instead of backing down, Assad's government answered with force. Security forces opened fire on protesters and arrested thousands, and rather than scaring people into silence, it pushed the country over the edge. The protests hardened into an armed uprising, and by 2012, Syria had collapsed into a full-blown civil war. It was in the middle of all that chaos that a group of pro-government supporters decided to take the fight online. They came together and formed what they called a cybersecurity alliance, with the goal of silencing any criticism of Assad and waging a digital war against the foreign media they believed was fueling the uprising back home. Their online campaign kicked off on August 5th, 2012, when something strange happened on Reuter's Twitter account. Out of nowhere, the account that belongs to one of the world's largest internal news agencies began firing off 22 tweets in a row, all of them making false claims about the Syrian conflict, painting a picture where Syrian rebels were suffering crushing losses at the hand of government forces. But those tweets didn't come from routers. The Sea had somehow gotten into the account and were using it as their own personal broadcast channel for fake news. By the time routers regained control, the damage was already done, and that was just the beginning. By May 2013, the Sea had set their sights on a bigger target. This time, they chose The Onion, an American digital media company known for its satirical news content. Starting around May 3rd, Sea operatives began sending emails to Onion employees from suspicious external addresses. On the surface, the emails looked completely normal, but they weren't. Each one contained a link that directed the recipient to a fake Google sign-in page, carefully designed to look like the real thing. What looked like a Washington Post link was actually redirected to a different URL. Once someone clicked through and entered their Google Apps credentials, the Sea had everything they needed. While most Onion employees didn't fall for it, at least one did, and just like that, the Sea had full access to the Onion's social media accounts. They wasted no time, and post after post started popping up on The Onion's Twitter, flooding the feed with pro-Assad messaging. It took a while, but The Onion eventually managed to claw their accounts back, and in the aftermath, Twitter reportedly began rolling out a more secure two-step verification process to stop something like this from happening again. But the Sea wasn't slowing down. Just days after Twitter introduced those new security measures, on May 24, 2013, ITV News London's Twitter account was hijacked by the same group, and as usual, the account was immediately used to push out false stories about Syrian rebels losing the war. ITV News London didn't hide the truth. They responded publicly, saying,
"We are aware that the @ITV London account has been infiltrated and we are working to return to normal services as soon as possible."
They did get the account back, just like the others, but with every hack, the Sea was getting bolder. 2 days later, they escalated in a way nobody had seen coming. Instead of going after a social media account, they breached the Android applications of the British broadcaster Sky News, defacing the app and replacing its content with their own graphics. By mid-2013, it was clear the Sea wasn't just a social media nuisance. They were much deeper than that, and they were about to prove it. On July 17, 2013, the Sea broke into the servers of Truecaller, a global directory app used by millions of people, and allegedly walked away with 459 gigabytes of data. They went a step further by releasing the company's internal server credentials, publicly showing how much they were in control of the app. Shortly after, Truecaller confirmed the breach but assured users that sensitive information had not been compromised, saying,
"Truecaller does not store passwords, credit card information, or any other sensitive information about our users. It is false information that attackers were able to access our users' Facebook, Twitter, or any other social media passwords."
It was the Sea's first data stealing operation, but what came next was on an entirely different scale. Between August 29th and 30th, 2013, the Sea took down the websites of the New York Times, the Huffington Post, and in what was arguably their most brazen move yet, even Twitter itself. During the attack, they also tampered with Twitter's domain registrar information, briefly listing themselves as the platform's admin and technical contacts. When ABC News asked the group why, a spokesperson gave them a direct answer.
"When we hack media, we do not destroy the site but only publish on it if possible, or publish an article that contains the truth of what is happening in Syria. So if the USA launches an attack on Syria, we may use methods of causing harm, both for the US economy or other. All American sites will be our targets and we may be more destructive."
Then in October 2013, the Sea went after something more personal. They posted a screenshot showing how they had broken into the Gmail account of at least one staff member at Organizing for Action, which is a non-profit organization dedicated to rallying support for Barack Obama. From there, they were apparently able to alter social media links through ShortSwitch, which is a URL shortening service, redirecting users to a 24-minute pro-Assad propaganda video. The video has since been deleted and can no longer be found anywhere online, but that wasn't the end of it. On January 23, 2014, the Sea hacked into CNN's Twitter account and began posting pro-Assad content. Within minutes, CNN deleted the tweets and later announced on their Facebook page that their accounts had been secured. But as aggressive and relentless as all of this had been, things were already starting to shift because on February 14, 2014, after they breached Forbes' website and Twitter accounts, they went completely silent. But that wasn't the end of their story. On May 10, 2016, it was announced that the authorities had captured one of the Sea members. His name was Peter Ramar, a 36-year-old Syrian national who participated in the online wars. After being found and arrested, Peter was extradited from Germany, where he lived, to the United States to answer for his role in the operation. But according to court findings, Peter wasn't a founding member. He'd watched the Sea attack American companies from a distance and eventually offered them his support, specifically by helping them run an extortion scheme that demanded payment in exchange for returning stolen documents. By September 2016, Peter was standing before a federal judge in Virginia, facing charges that included unauthorized computer intrusions, extortion, money laundering, wire fraud, and violations of Syrian sanctions. He ended up receiving a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison, marking one of the first times the Sea's digital operations resulted in a real-world consequence for one of their own. While the Sea fought wars with codes and links, the next case is terrifying since it involves a war with guns.
For the first time, we're hearing from the Garland police officer who single-handedly stopped 2 ISIS-inspired terrorists from a mass shooting at an event center.
It's May 3rd, 2015, and about 150 people are gathered at the Curtis Colwell Center for a contest, and in the blink of an eye, 2 men in body armor pulled into the parking lot with 3 rifles, 3 handguns, and 1,500 rounds of ammunition between them. And before anyone knew it, the parking lot rained bullets. The story started a decade before, in 2005, when a teenager named Elton Simpson first appeared in the city of Phoenix after having moved from the suburb of Chicago. Elton attended Washington High School, where he decided to convert to Islam. Even though Elton was born in a Christian household, he was surprisingly deeply committed to his new faith, and he soon became a regular at the Islamic Community Center of Phoenix, where everyone knew him as an innocent young man finding his footing. But by the next year, in 2006, the FBI knew him as a completely different person. The agents had received information that he was interested in traveling overseas to join jihadist fighters in Somalia, and for that, they started watching him. For 4 years, they ran the investigation, all while recording conversations through an informant. And what those recordings captured was someone whose private thoughts were very different from the quiet community teenager people knew at the mosque. In May 2009, Elton could be heard telling the informant,
"I'm telling you, man, we can make it to the battlefield. It's time to roll. If you get shot or you get killed, it's heaven straight away. That's what we're here for, so why not take that route?"
Then, in 2010, the day before he was scheduled to fly to Somalia, federal agents moved in and arrested him for making a false statement regarding terrorism. Before anything, the Islamic Community Center of Phoenix posted his $100,000 cash bond and then proceeded with the court case. Eventually, Elton was sentenced to 3 years probation and a $600 fine. His sentence was minimal because the judge found there wasn't sufficient evidence to prove he had actually planned to join a terrorist organization. And to be sure he wouldn't be causing future problems, he was placed on a federal no-fly list before sending him home. Now, Elton had a roommate named Nadir Sufi. Nadir was born in Dallas and spent parts of his childhood in Pakistan, where his parents had separated. He'd attended the International School of Islamabad, where he was pretty friendly and popular. But when he moved back to the United States in the late 1990s, people who knew him said he struggled to readjust to American life. He took pre-med courses at the University of Utah with the aim of going to med school, but then he dropped out and spent years in Phoenix running a carpet cleaning business. At one point, he ran a small halal pizza restaurant that closed about 5 months before everything unraveled. During this period, Nadir got into minor trouble with the law, including traffic violations, a misdemeanor assault, and a dismissed drug charge. Sometime around June 2014, both Elton and Nadir connected with a third man named Abdul Malik Abdul Karim. But Abdul Malik himself wasn't originally Abdul Malik. He was born Decorus Lowell Thomas in Philadelphia, but he converted to Islam a year earlier in 2013 and changed his name. He was well known around the Islamic Community Center of Phoenix, where he sometimes cleaned carpets. And similarly to his friends, he also had a history with the FBI. Back in 2012, the FBI had investigated him after finding a terrorism-related document on his computer and uncovering a plot he had discussed to attack Super Bowl XLIX in Glendale with pipe bombs. He was also let go since nothing came of that investigation at the time, but back to 2014, the trio had started talking about much more than just pipe bombs. Abdul Malik began housing Elton and Nadir, and the three quietly planned a major attack. Although Abdul Malik didn't plan to physically participate, he supplied Elton and Nadir with weapons they'd need for the attack. He majorly funded his friend's operation by faking an injury from a car accident and filing an insurance claim. Between January and May of 2015, the three of them practiced shooting together in Phoenix in anticipation of the D-Day. While the preparation was going on, Elton built an online presence on Twitter and connected to some of the most dangerous figures in the ISIS network at the time. One of those figures was a British man named Junaid Hussain. Junaid first came to public attention in 2012 when he was convicted in the United Kingdom for hacking into former Prime Minister Tony Blair's address book and posting it online. For the offense, he was sentenced to 6 months in prison, and after his release, he left for Syria and joined the terrorist organization ISIS, where he founded a pro-ISIS hacking group called the Cyber Caliphate. That group made international headlines in January 2015 when it briefly briefly seized control of the United States Central Command's Twitter account. On January 12, 2015, just after 1 p.m. Eastern Time, the official Twitter account for the US Central Command, the military headquarters, suddenly changed. The profile photo was replaced by a black and white image of a masked figure draped in extremist imagery, positioned next to the flag of ISIS. To understand how significant this was, you need to know what the US Central Command actually is, also known as CENTCOM. It is the command responsible for US military operations across the Middle East, Central Asia, and parts of South Asia. When America goes to war in that region of the world, CENTCOM is the one planning and running it. But on that day, the control fell into ISIS's hands. In no time, the first tweet came out saying,
"American soldiers, we are coming. Watch your back."
Another tweet followed almost immediately saying,
"ISIS is already here. We are in your PCs in each military base."
The second tweet came with a photo of two women in military uniforms working at a command station inside an operating base. Then came the third post saying,
"The cyber caliphate under the auspices of ISIS continues its cyber jihad. We won't stop. We know everything about you, your wives and children, US soldiers. We are watching you."
The message framed the attack as retaliation for the US-led military action in Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. The account continued posting for 30 minutes, and what came next moved this from a threatening message into something that looked far more alarming. The hackers began bumping what appeared to be sensitive military documents, phone numbers, and personal email addresses for senior staff across the 10 main US Army component commands on the feed. At the same time, CENTCOM's YouTube channel was also hijacked, but about an hour later the two accounts went dark. Twitter and YouTube suspended both pages while the situation was assessed. Since then, Junaid was named the third highest target on the Pentagon's ISIS kill list, behind only the former ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who was responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands including his own children, and Mohammed Emwazi, a notorious ISIS executioner otherwise known as Jihadi John, who went viral in 2010s for appearing in ISIS propaganda videos that showed the brutal killings of British, American, and Japanese aid workers and journalists. These were the kind of men Elton was trying to connect with on Twitter. But it wasn't just Junaid. On April 23, 2015, Elton tweeted at an account believed to belong to an American man named Mohammed Abdullahi Hassan. Mohammed had traveled from Minneapolis to Somalia in 2008 to join Al-Shabaab, an Al-Qaeda affiliate, and was believed to still be operating overseas under the Twitter name Mujahid Miski. Elton's tweet to him included a link to a news article about an upcoming event in Garland, Texas, which was a cartoon drawing contest featuring images of the Islamic prophet Muhammad. He then captioned it,
"When will they ever learn?"
Mohammed retweeted it and followed up with his own message saying,
"The brothers from the Charlie Hebdo attack did their part. It's time for the brothers in the US to do their part."
In case you don't know, that was a direct reference to the Charlie Hebdo shooting, when on January 7th, 2015, just 4 months before that specific tweet, two French-born Algerian Muslim brothers opened fire and killed 12 people and injured 11 because they worked at the French satirical weekly magazine called Charlie Hebdo that had become the target of Al-Qaeda after they made some cartoons depicting the Islamic prophet. He also posted pictures of Amadi Koulibaly, the gunman who had attacked a Paris kosher market during the Charlie Hebdo siege, alongside the caption,
"If only we had men like these brothers in the States, our beloved Muhammad would not have been drawn."
For context, the event they were targeting was called the First Annual Muhammad Art Exhibit and Contest, organized by Pamela Geller's American Freedom Defense Initiative at the Curtis Colwell Center in Garland. The $10,000 contest had attracted about 150 attendees and 350 submissions, and because of known sensitivities around the event, organizers had spent over $10,000 on 40 off-duty officers and private security. The FBI, a SWAT team, and ATF, and the Texas Department of Public Safety were also involved. Once the FBI caught a hold of what could possibly go wrong at the event, they sent an alert to the Garland Police Department on May 3rd, 2015, 3 hours before the event started, stating Elton Simpson had been identified as someone who was interested in the event and might show up. But somehow, the police department claimed they didn't get the alert, so the event proceeded as scheduled. Some minutes before 7 p.m., Elton had sent out a tweet saying,
"May Allah accept us as mujahideen. #ExasAttack,"
and urged his followers to follow Junaid. At the time he made that tweet, he changed his profile photo to the picture of Anwar al-Awlaki, the American-born cleric killed in a US drone strike in Yemen in 2011, who had repeatedly called for violence against those who depicted the Prophet Muhammad. Around 7 p.m., as the event was going to an end, a car pulled up to a barricade outside the Curtis Colwell Center. Elton and Nadir got out, both wearing body armor. They opened fire on a police car parked near the the entrance, where Garland police officer Gregory Stevens and an unarmed Garland Independent School District security guard named Bruce Joyner were sitting. Bruce was shot in the ankle, while Gregory returned fire, wounding both men. SWAT officers then moved in and ended it, killing both Elton and Nadir. In Syria, just minutes after news of the shooting broke, Junaid tweeted,
Allahu Akbar, 2 of our brothers just opened fire at the Prophet Muhammad art exhibition in Texas.
ISIS claimed responsibility for the shooting through its Al Bayan radio station, calling Elton and Nadir
2 soldiers of the Caliphate.
It was the first time the group had publicly claimed credit for an attack on the US mainland. With Elton and Nadir dead, authorities began working on apprehending every person associated with the attack. On June 11, 2015, Abdul Malik was arrested and charged with conspiracy, making false statements and interstate transportation of firearms with intent to commit a felony. Although he told FBI investigators he had not been asked to participate directly in the Garland attack, a confidential informant contradicted that, telling investigators that Abdul Malik had been angry about not being able to obtain suppressors and bulletproof vests for the operation. In addition to his charges, he was also charged with conspiring to support ISIS and plotting the Super Bowl attack. Then on March 17, 2016, he was found guilty and sentenced to 30 years in federal prison in February 2017. Then in August 2015, 3 months after the attack, a US drone strike in Syria ended the life of Junaid. Pentagon officials confirmed the strike was deliberate, targeting Junaid specifically for his role in inspiring and facilitating attacks in the West. While the Garland attackers were radicalized by strangers, the next case is horrifying since it involves violence orchestrated by 2 people the victim trusted most in the world.
A teenage girl is stabbed to death, and the 2 people charged are her 2 best friends.
Not many friends are truly inseparable, but in the case of Skylar Nessie, Sheila Eddy, and Rachel Schoaf, these best friends had a relationship to die for. But their friendship didn't start as a trio. It all started with Skylar, who was an only child of Mary and Dave Nessie. Her parents made sure she had everything she needed and also became her first friends. But when Skylar turned 8, she found a friend in Sheila, and the 2 grew up becoming best friends. Sheila did not only become friends with Skylar, she was also accepted by Mary and Dave like she was their own biological daughter. But by the time they got to high school, Sheila found another friend, Rachel, and brought her into the group. From there, they became an inseparable trio. Everyone knew them as BFFs in school and everywhere they went. However, online, things eventually started to look different. The 3 were very active on Twitter, so much so that they posted anything going on with them as individuals and at the same time as a group. Ultimately, it became clear that the 3 had underlying tensions with each other. In May 2012, Skylar tweeted,
"You're a two-faced girl and obviously stupid if you thought I wouldn't find out."
While it wasn't clear what that tweet was about and who it was talking about, another tweet from Skylar that says,
"Won't miss anyone from school over summer because if we were really friends, we'll hang out. If we aren't, we won't."
shows Skylar wasn't feeling good about Sheila and Rachel becoming close friends without her. This was confirmed by one of their classmates, Daniel Hoviter, who said in an interview,
"One time sophomore year, me and Rachel were at practice for Pride and Prejudice and Rachel had her phone up to her ear and she was laughing. She was like, 'Listen to this,' but Skylar didn't know Sheila had put her on a 3-way calling and Rachel was listening in."
Again, 2 months later on July 4th, 2012, Skylar said in multiple tweets,
"It really doesn't take much to piss me off. Sick of being at home. Thanks, friends. Love hanging out with you all too."
Showing how Skylar was having a rollercoaster of emotions. And then the next day on July 5th, she tweeted again,
"You doing things like this is why I can never completely trust you."
Mary also noticed Skylar and Sheila were fighting a lot on the phone, but she didn't think it was anything that required the intervention of an adult. Unknown to Mary, things were about to get a lot more grisly. On the morning of the following day, July 6th, 2012, Mary and Dave discovered Skylar was not in her room, but her windows were open, which suggested she might have snuck out the house in the middle of the night. They also noticed that she left behind her cell phone charger, toiletries, and toothbrush, which all indicated she planned to come back. However, Skylar never returned home, and to make the situation even more disturbing, she didn't show up at work. Skylar worked a shift at Wendy's in the evening, and since she started, that day was the first time she didn't report for work. At first, first, Mary and Dave were not panicking because they felt she might be with her friends. But after calling Sheila and Rachel and learning that the trio snuck out at night and they dropped Skylar off at the end of the road, they grew alarmed. After getting this information, Mary and Dave checked the CCTV footage of their home and saw Skylar go into a sedan parked outside of the house, but the footage didn't capture her coming back to the house. At this point, they knew something was wrong, so they reported Skylar missing. The next day, Sheila and her mother joined the Nessies to look for Skylar throughout the neighborhood, but nothing really came up. The police started investigating the case by interviewing everyone associated with Skylar one way or another. Sheila told the officers the exact same thing she had told Skylar's parents, and Rachel also repeated the exact same story, even though they were interviewed separately. The investigators found this very odd because it sounded like the two rehearsed the answers they gave to the investigators. And to make things worse, Rachel and Sheila told the authorities they had dropped Skylar off at around 11 p.m, but according to the grainy CCTV footage from her house, she left the apartment at 12:30 a.m, and the car pulled away at 12:35 a.m. and was never seen again. But that wasn't enough to name them suspects, so the investigation went on. The officers looked closely into their social media posts and discovered they had a relationship that was different from what everyone knew. They later discovered that Sheila was very lively and vocal online, while Rachel was reserved and quiet, but none of their posts hinted that they were upset about Skylar's disappearance. The day after Skylar went missing, July 7th, 2012, Sheila's very first tweet was a casual birthday message to a friend. In the months that followed, she posted about TV shows, school, and hating homework. And almost 4 months later, on November 5th, 2012, she made an odd tweet saying,
"No one on this earth can handle me and Rachel. If you think you can, you're wrong."
As weeks rolled into months, more people followed the story on Twitter, and certain people even accused the girls of having committed the murder and threatened they would soon get caught. Sheila and Rachel then secluded themselves from their other friends and relied more on each other. In the weeks that followed, authorities focused more on Sheila after they confirmed that the car in the security footage belonged to her, and also that the girls had lied about their location after tracing the movement of the vehicle on the night Skylar disappeared. All evidence kept pointing at Sheila and Rachel, and suspicion was building. Eventually, the FBI got involved, and investigators continued pressing both girls. The pressure mounted, and on December 28, 2012, the investigators received a call from a parent who said,
"I have an issue with a 16-year-old daughter of mine. I can't control her anymore. She's hitting us, she's screaming, she's running through the neighborhood."
The caller was Patricia Schoaf, Rachel's mother. The authorities found their way to Rachel's house, where they found her father trying to contain her. They then packed her up and drove her to a local psychiatric hospital, where she remained for 5 days. On January 3rd, 2013, Rachel demanded to be immediately taken to her lawyer's office, where she confessed to the killing of Skylar. And as she continued talking, the grim truth about Skylar's case became clear. According to Rachel, one day, when they were in science class, they both agreed to kill Skylar simply because they didn't like her and didn't want to be friends with her anymore. On the night of the murder, Rachel grabbed a shovel from her dad's house while Sheila took 2 knives from her mother's kitchen. They also took with them a change of clothes and kitchen supplies. They then drove to Skylar's neighborhood to pick her up. Skylar was excited to go out with them that night because previously the trio had driven to Brave, which is a town just over the state line, into Pennsylvania to smoke and get high, and that's exactly what they had planned to do once again that night. When they arrived at their destination, Sheila and Rachel brought out their pipes for smoking when they realized they were not holding a lighter. Skylar then volunteered to go get it from the car, but unknown to her, her best friends were only waiting for her to turn her back before they did the unimaginable to her. All Skylar heard was the duo counting to 3, and the next thing, they pounced and started attacking her with knives. Skylar tried to get away, but they had already stabbed her knee, so they could not run very far. After Rachel saw Skylar was injured, she stopped attacking her, but Sheila kept going until there was complete silence from Skylar. After they were sure they had murdered her, they attempted to bury her in the woods, but the ground was too hard and rocky, so instead they covered her body with branches, dirt, and leaves. The two then changed out of their bloodied clothes, wiped themselves, and the car then fled the scene. After her confession, Rachel agreed to lead authorities to Skylar's body. It was the exact place where Rachel mentioned they drove to. However, the whole place was already covered in snow, so she didn't remember the exact location. Initially, the investigators couldn't find the body, but because Rachel already confessed, she was charged with murder. At this time, Sheila didn't know that Rachel had confessed, because at the same time the confession was going on, Sheila posted on Twitter saying,
"Staying home on a Tuesday is best because Law and Order SVU is on all day."
While the authorities waited for Sheila to incriminate herself with a tweet or something else, they they got on a break on the search for Skylar's body. They found her remains nearly unidentifiable in the woods and officially confirmed it belonged to her on March 13th. And the craziest part, they determined Skylar had been stabbed more than 50 times. Within hours of releasing a statement that they had found the body, Sheila posted a picture of herself and Skylar on Twitter and captioned it,
"Rest easy, Skylar. You'll always be my best friend,"
calling the day the worst day of her life. To have reasons to arrest Sheila, the officers made Rachel wear a wire and asked her to visit Sheila like nothing happened, to try and bait her into confessing. But in the end, nothing came out of it. However, on March 30th, 2013, with investigators closing in and the weight of everything pressing down, Sheila tweeted 6 words that would later come back to haunt her, saying,
"We really did go on 3.
On the same day, the officers executed a search warrant on Sheila's house, seizing her phone, her computer, her tablet, kitchen knives, and a Toyota Camry registered to the residence. The FBI then ran forensic analysis on the car, and the result picked blood samples in the truck. After running DNA on the sample, it matched Skylar's, and so Sheila was arrested on May 1st, 2013, in a restaurant parking lot. On the same day, Rachel turned herself in, and both of them were charged with Skylar's murder, almost a full year after it happened. Rachel pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, a lesser charge in exchange for her cooperation with investigators, and 9 months later, in February 2014, she was sentenced to 30 years in prison. During her sentencing, she apologized to the Nessie family together with her family. However, in Sheila's case, she pleaded guilty to first-degree murder on January 24th, 2014, roughly 18 months after Skylar's death. She was sentenced to life in prison. During her sentencing, she offered no apology and showed no remorse at all. Both women remain incarcerated at the Lakin Correctional Center in West Virginia, and even though Rachel was eligible for parole in 2024, her parole was denied. In the years since Skylar's death, Dave and Mary have worked to turn something unimaginable into something lasting. They helped push through what they named Skylar's Law in West Virginia, which requires Amber Alerts to be issued for all missing children, not only those believed to have been abducted. And they transformed the wooded area in Pennsylvania where their daughter's body was found into a memorial, a place where people can come and remember who Skylar was before the night her 2 best friends counted to 3. While the internet left clues to catch Skylar's killers, the next case is gut-wrenching since it involves a serial killer who used Twitter as his hunting ground.
And Japan has executed a man dubbed the Twitter killer.
Back in 2003, Japan experienced its highest ever recorded number of people checking themselves out of this world due to economic instability and societal stress. However, by 2017, the number had significantly reduced, but crazily enough, the country still remains second highest among major industrialized nations, with South Korea being at the first place. And although the number declined, the leading cause of death among people within to 39 years of age still remained self-checkout from this world. And while most of these individuals had the more common reasons that I mentioned earlier, a 23-year-old woman named Akiko Tamura had a very different reason. In the same year, Akiko lost her mother, and so it affected her mental health seriously. It became so bad that her brother, who we will call Yuma, had to take her to a group home for care and assistance from psychiatrists. In case you don't know, a group home is a private residence where a small number of unrelated people with specific care, medical, or social needs live together. They are staffed by training professionals 24/7, and they provide a supervised, supportive environment for individuals who cannot live independently, but at the same time do not require heavy medical institutionalization either. However, unlike some homes, this group home allows residents to use their phones and also move in and out of the facility as they wish. Akiko sometimes went out and always returned to the home until October 21st, 2017, the day Akiko left the home and never came back. Yuma was immediately identified of Akiko's disappearance, and so he started a search for her everywhere. He didn't limit his search to only places his legs could go, he also went on the internet to try and find any clues. Somehow, he was able to log into Akiko's Twitter, and there he found out that she had been having conversations with certain people. However, a particular conversation stood out from the others, and it was between Akiko and an account named Hangman. The messages were disturbing enough that he immediately went to the police. It appeared Akiko had posted about being depressed and wanted to check herself out of this world when Hangman reached out to her saying he would help her with it. In the conversation, Hangman can be seen with bizarre replies like,
"Are you planning to check yourself out of this world by hanging? Hanging doesn't cause pain. If it does hurt, it's probably because your airway is blocked or the cushioning material doesn't fit you."
After this conversation, the two then agreed to meet up, and that was the last time Akiko would be seen online and anywhere. Yuma grew even more worried when he looked closer at Hangman's profile, because on his bio was a disturbing write-up that read,
"I want to spread knowledge image of hanging. I want to become a truly aggressive force. DM me if you're interested.
Also, his pinned tweet read,
Either at school or at work, bullying won't stop. If it's a place you go to every day, if you don't get along well with the people you meet, it will take a toll on your mind. All throughout the world, even though it may not make the news, there are a lot of people out there who are in agony, contemplating sending themselves out of this world. I want to lend those people a hand.
On the surface, it becomes a little confusing as to whether Hangman was trying to help people get out of depression or actually leading them to their deaths. To get to the root of the matter and to know if Hangman knew where Akiko was, Yuma asked one of his female friends, who we will call May, to DM Hangman with a fake account. May approached the account with stories of depression, and before long, Hangman would invite her over to his house. By this time, the police were already fully involved, and so 10 days after Akiko disappeared on October 31st, 2017, they marched to the address May got from Hangman. It was a one-bedroom apartment labeled Room 101 in a building in Zama, Kanagawa Prefecture near Tokyo, Japan. After a few knocks on the door, a man answered and was met with questions about Akiko. To everyone's surprise, he didn't argue, but instead led the police straight to a freezer in his house. Inside the freezer were dismembered human body parts, and the craziest part is, there was more than one cooling storage with the same content in the house. By the time the police were done searching the house, they found the dismembered remains of 9 people packed into 3 cold storage coolers and 5 large toolboxes. They also found knives, a saw, woodworking tools, and ropes in his apartment. This discovery kickstarted immediate investigation into the case as detectives began to question other residents of the area. According to Hangman's neighbors, they had smelled something foul coming from the unit for weeks, and they also noticed he left his ventilating fan on almost every time. The investigators also found out that something of the remains had already been placed in the garbage, collected and taken away before police arrived. Next, they determined the real identity of Hangman to be Takehiro Shiraishi, who was born on October 9th, 1990 in Zama, Japan, so he had just turned 27 only 22 days earlier. And by every single account from people who knew him, he was completely unremarkable in the best possible way. Neighbors described him as a quiet child who was able to socialize normally. According to friends, he played baseball, made friends, and got average grades. There was genuinely nothing about him that would make you think twice. Well, almost nothing. Because one former high school classmate did recall that Takehiro had this game he likes to play called a choking game. He and his friends would strangle each other until they passed out for fun, and at one point, Takehiro blacked out from it. After graduating high school in 2009 at the age of 19, he landed a job at a supermarket. But within 2 years, he left that behind and started working in the adult industry in Kabukicho, Tokyo's largest red light district. Takehiro's job there was to work as a scout, basically approach young women on the street and recruit them to work at adult parlors. But even here, Takehiro was terrible at this job. He quickly earned a reputation for being a creepy scout, as locals described him. Soon, people started to warn other women about him, and then in February 2017, it caught up to him. He was arrested for trying to illegally recruit a younger female human into adult work, but he wasn't held for too long, and he later received a suspended sentence, meaning he avoided prison time. By the summer of 2017, Takehiro started talking to a woman named Mizuki Miura, who he met on Twitter, and soon they became close. He spoke to Mizuki about getting an apartment, but Takehiro wasn't earning an income. He had to borrow the rent from Mizuki. After getting the apartment, he then told his father he would be moving into his own apartment in Zama. Not long after that, Takehiro started becoming scared that Mizuki would demand he repay her money, which he had no way to earn. He then thought of a way to make sure Mizuki never asked him for the money, and so in August 2017, he invited her to his apartment, and when Mizuki started to relax a bit, he saw an opportunity and strangled her to death. After that, he violated her and then dismembered her body. To cover up his crimes, he packed her remains into storage containers and toolboxes and covered them in cat litter to mask the smell. During his interview, Takehiro told the investigators that after he killed Mizuki, he discovered he could earn a living by doing the same thing to other women. If he could get more women to visit him in his apartment, he could satisfy his desires and take whatever money his victims had without having to ever work again. He then ended his thought with the idea that it's only a problem if he got caught. He then went on Twitter to lure more women with multiple accounts and posts like,
I've been asked a lot if smoke inhalation is an easier death, but I'd definitely say it's more agonizing. Many people imagine you can die peacefully in your sleep with sleeping medication, but in fact it gives you severe nausea and headaches because of the nitric oxide, and you won't be able to actually sleep at all. Plus, it highly has possibility to cause lasting effects, so it'll be bad if you happen to survive.
In no time, he saw people who were going through depression. One of them was Kiriha Ishihara, a smaller human. The two talked on Twitter for about 5 days, after which Takehiro invited Kureha to his house. After attacking her intimately, he strangled her with a rope and took less than $100, which was everything she had on her. 2 days later, 20-year-old Shogo Nishinaka, who reached out to Takehiro after he noticed his friend Mizuki went missing. Takehiro invited him to his apartment, and there he murdered Shogo solely because he was getting close to the truth. Between August 2017 and October 2017, in just 2 months, on top of the 3 people I just talked about, Takehiro had killed 6 more people, namely Haniko Sarashina, Hitomi Fujima, Natsumi Kubo, Akira Suda, Kazumi Maruyama, and Aiko Tamura, his last victim. When investigators examined what was left of their bodies, they found out that they all had defensive wounds, which means none of them really wanted to die. Takehiro confessed to all of the murders and even stated in court,
"None a single one of my victims consented."
On October 1st, 2020, which was almost 3 years after all the murders and just 8 days before his 30th birthday, he pleaded guilty to 9 counts of murder. In court, he was asked if he had any regret at all, and he responded, saying,
"If they hadn't caught me, I would regret nothing."
On December 15th, 2020, he was sentenced to death, and while he waited for his execution day, he granted interviews and expressed his interest in marriage, saying,
"I want to look for someone who will marry me while I'm in prison. Several people have come in the last 2 years, but nothing has led to marriage. I get these kinds of fan letters sometimes too, but there aren't many women who would become the kind of person to come see me here."
Takehiro was hopeful that he'd get to live for more years solely because in Japan, death row prisoners are not told when their execution will happen until the morning it occurs. But his wishful thinking didn't last forever, as he was eventually executed by, ironically, hanging on June 27th, 2025, 8 years after the first murder, at the age of 35.